Hi guys, hope everyone's well. It's Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock UK time again. So I'm gonna keep sectioning off while we'll let a few more people come through so that nobody misses the explanation of what I'm going to do today. When we first started these lives, I think it was 3 weeks ago now, 4 weeks ago, I said that I wanted to focus on things at the beginning that were a little bit more relevant to salon life and to what we're all going to be doing when we get back to work. And I wanted to show some techniques. So we did the graduated haircut with the razor. Then last week we did more of a kind of layered, textured bob shape with the razor. But today, as I said at the beginning, I want to go a little bit more conceptual. So what I explained was that I'm going to start to get a little bit more experimental, and I'm going to start to do a few shapes that would be more something I may do for a photographic collection or maybe do for a show. This is one of those haircuts. So I'm going to just keep sectioning off, let a few more people come through, and then I'm going to explain where the idea came from and what I'm going to be doing today. Okay, right. So, as I just said, for anyone that's just come through, this haircut now, this series is going to progress into haircuts that are a little bit more conceptual and something that, rather than being a technique that you might directly take back to use on a client, it's something that's going to hopefully make you excited, maybe trigger something in your own mind that you want to go away and start to create something else. So I'm going to explain where the idea comes from, and then I'm going to get cracking and explain the sectioning. So, anyone that tuned in last week, you'll remember that I showed this book, Silver Skate 70s. This was a book that has been gifted to me by some friends, some photographer friends, and it's about skateboarding in the 70s in Los Angeles. And the haircuts in it, I mean, you can see, if I show that a little bit closer up to the front, you can see the haircut and the way that moves as the guy's skating. The colour on it is fantastic. And there's been so many ideas that have been developing from that. So around the time that I received this book, I went over to the village in January to teach the Davines art team the collection, the Eternals that we just shot. And while my colleague Ashley was educating on the colour techniques, I was at a bit of a loose end. So I started to play around on one of the blocks and one of the mannequin heads. And the haircut that I developed on one of the mannequin heads was quite an extreme asymmetric. It was a line of a bob that went shorter in the front to longer in the back, and then it had a very, very soft textured bowl shape all the way through here, that then the short panel kicked around over the length of the bowl. And I liked what I did on the block, but didn't really think what I was going to do with it. But then I received this book, and you know when sometimes 2 things, 3 things come together in your mind, and you start noticing the same things. And I've been having this idea of creating extreme asymmetrics in a haircut. And then when I played around at the village in January, and then I received this book. And then one of the looks in this book, I'm going to show you it through here. Can you see how the guy's in movement on his skateboard? And the movement has made this side of the hair look really short, and then it all starts to flow through. And if you're going really close, you can see it almost has got like a heavy fringe, short side, and then flows through. Now, obviously, it's like that because he is in movement and the wind's blowing and the gravity's affecting his hair. But I'm going to use that as my initial inspiration. I'm going to use that as my influence, and I'm going to create a shape that's similar. And as I said last week, this book is the start of my next personal collection. There's so many hair ideas in it. There's so many beautiful bleaching things that we can use the Davines Century of Light to develop some looks. because the cuts are so raw, they're left to dry naturally, there's no over styling, which suits my taste very well. So you guys, what you're going to see tonight is basically day one of one of the looks that I'm going to be working on for my next collection. So I've taken a side parting through here, and I've done it the reason I've done it, which will become clear later, is because the longer piece of hair that I leave, I want it to just cover over this eye, and I want the shorter piece to just come to the opposite side of the nose. I can see that Natalie's asking a question. The book is called Silver Skate 70s. I'll put a link to it in the comment section afterwards. As all the comments are coming through, I'll try and answer as many as I can while I'm cutting, but if I miss any, then I'll make sure I go into the comment section afterwards and answer those for you. So basically the haircut's going to be very extreme. It's going to be a textured kind of left to dry natural bowl all the way through here, and it's going to flick over this longer side that's going to sit totally disconnected in a really strong natural cut. Right. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an undercut through this side. Now when I start to scissor over comb, I always prefer to start from top to bottom so that I can get my shape in and then flow from there. So I'm literally going through the top section, you can see there. I don't want to take it too short, but I really want it to be tight because I'm going to create kind of an undercut with the length on the top. Okay. I like to start at the top when I do my scissor over comb because I like to commit to the length and the shape right at the beginning, and then once I'm happy with that first section, it's a case of just going down. Right. So you can see I've committed to that length now, and now it's a case about dropping down, keeping my comb parallel and joining that in. I'll spin around a little bit so you guys can look a little bit flatter at it as well, so you can see both sides. So for anyone that's just coming onto the live, what I was saying, at the beginning of this series, I started to do haircuts that could be more techniques that could be taken back in the salon. But as the series progresses, I'm going to get a little bit more conceptual and a little bit more creative, if you will, with what I'm doing, so that some of the techniques are there to not necessarily give you something to take back and use on your first client, but to maybe make something trigger in your mind that you want to go away and think, okay, I'm going to start looking at what books I've got on my shelf, or I'm going to start looking at what inspires me and developing some looks. Because I think, yeah, it's great, we all want to go back and get busy with our clients, but it's quite nice if you can leave this situation that we're all in with a little bit more inspiration and just a bit more ideas for yourself, because I certainly find it, so I'm sure most of you guys do, that day-to-day life of your career, of the business, of seeing clients, it can sometimes get in the way of actually sitting down and working on ideas. So, I want to see my clients with a fresh approach when I get back, but I also want to go back with I also want to go back with new ideas for my personal work as well. Is it better if I work from this angle? So you can see straight through it. Right, so I've taken that off short through there. You can see as well how fast it is when you work from the top and work down with the scissor over comb. You can really see the control you have. Especially on hair this length, if I tried to go up from the underneath, I'd be kind of getting lost in all the hair. So that's not really what I want to do. So I'm going to go through here. I'll pull in quite close so you guys can see. I'm going to use the points of the scissors and I'm going to refine off the hairline. Again, you'll notice that I'm not coming in on an angle, chipping away. I'm cutting vertically into the hair because I still want, while this haircut is going to be strong, there's no arguing that, it still needs to have like a softness to it. So all the lines that I create will be left to dry naturally. I'm going to use the razor in some of the shapes so that everything still has a kind of, I don't want to say wearability, but it still looks like hair. It doesn't look like a machine's cut it and it's too clean, because that's not what I want to create with this. So the reason I've undercut this on the mannequin is because if you were doing this on a client and she didn't have such fine hair, you could go straight in and create the line. But with the mannequin, I find if I was to create this bowl shape that I want to create, if I was to do this on a straight away without creating the undercut, it would be too round and it'd probably look a little bit dated. So I want to, especially because of the length I've taken, I'm going to create a line that's quite short in here. And if you do that on a mannequin without creating an undercut, I find it doesn't sit so well. What scissors do I use? I use the little black scissors from M&P. If I pull that out there, maybe you can see them. I'll put a link in the section, in the comments afterwards. So I'm going to work from this angle so you guys can see what I'm doing. Or maybe if I spin around, you might be able to see a little bit better. Yeah, this should be better. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a line that comes here, halfway up through the undercut, and then drops through the fringe on a slight angle going towards the longer side. And the reason for this angle will become clear later when I cut the longer side, because while these are two totally disconnected sides, I do want them to have, they still need to have a flow, and you'll see what I mean by that at the end. So let's come in here so you guys can see. Can you guys see that? So you'll see I'm taking it into my fingers and I'm just turning my fingers and I'm turning the scissors under because I want, and can you see how that just sits under straight away? And it's basically me, as I take my section, I just turn my hand and I just turn the scissors slightly under. So the underneath piece of this section is maybe 1 millimeter shorter and it just sits in. Okay, and I'm following through to the front side now. Everyone see that? I'm using the pivot point snap caps. I'm sure some of you guys have used them before. I really like them. This is the first time I've used the blonde one. I've used the brunettes in the previous 2 lives that I've done. And the quality of the hair is great. And the actual colour of the hair is great. You know, sometimes when you get a mannequin head out of the packet and it's got a real, not so nice blonde, I actually quite like the kind of fawny type colour that these ones have naturally. So you'll see we've got the line going through here, drops through the fringe, and then starts to drop on an angle, going longer to just on the other side of the nose, and then we stop. Okay, make sure that we're in here. Okay, I'm taking parallel sections, so I take a square section on this side, and then I take a square section here. So I'm taking almost like an L shape, working my way up, so that I'm incorporating the fringe and the side as I cut. I'm not working all the way up through the side and then having to work up separately all the way through to through the fringe, because with anything I do like this, I want it to have a flow, and I find the more sections I have, or the more separation I have, the less of a flow there is. So if I can incorporate it all into one, then I much prefer to do that. Is this a good angle for everyone? Okay, so I'm pulling it back. I'm elevating slightly this time, turning my fingers under. The next time I cut the side, I'll do it from profile so you can see underneath. Hi Dee. So, for anyone that's just missed, Dee's just asked what the inspiration for the cut is. So, the inspiration for the cut came from me working on a few concepts of wanting to create some very, very extreme asymmetric haircuts. So it can go from really short and strong into quite long and soft. And around the same time that I was thinking of this, I got this book gifted to me called Silver Skate 70s, about the skateboarding scene in Los Angeles in the 70s. And there's this image in the book of a guy on a skateboard, and the movement and the gravity is making one side of the hair look very short, flowing into a longer side. And I'm going to do my version of that. What was that? After you cut that section, can we see your parting? Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to spin around here so you guys can see in the front there. You can see I'm working on a slight diagonal angle as I come through the side. The reason for that as well is because I want, when I've got all the texture in and when I'm letting this dry naturally, I want it to try and kick and wave. So I want to leave myself enough length here that it has the opportunity to do that. Someone asked to see the parting. There is the parting. It's just on the other side of the nose. So basically, I want this longer side of the haircut to fall and cover the eye, so that by the end we can only see one eye. That's the look. So the parting, as the corner of the eye, corner of the eyebrow, flows up there. I'm going to cut this side section in profile, so you guys can see the elevation that I'm taking through there. So I've elevated a little bit last time and a bit more each time. But that little tip that I just said about twisting your fingers under, it makes all the difference. So I just comb that into my hand and I just do a slight turn, and then rather than cutting straight on with my scissors, I just turn my scissors in, like invert the scissors as well. So those two things, you'll see when I drop the section, the hair jumps under anyway. I don't really need to push it. You can see it kind of wants to just go in there. And that means for a haircut like this and how I like to do it, where I'm going to let everything dry naturally, it's perfect, because I'm not going to have to try and wrap dry and do any form of coax into the hair. It's just going to do it. So this last section, is it going to be the last section? That's a little bit too thick for the last section. Second to last section. So each section, as I said, is like an L. So I'm taking a square section here, and then I'm moving across into the fringe, so that I'm cutting each bit at the same point. And then it's about combing it just to let it distribute evenly, and distribute as it naturally wants to fall. Because naturalness is what this haircut is going to be all about. So if I try and start to force anything into place, it isn't going to work. Would I normally use a lot of tension on a cut like this? No, hardly anything. That's why with him, I don't want any spring back and I don't want any rigidity. I don't really use tension in any haircut. I very much like the hair to be the hair. It's almost like the comb is the only bit of tension I put into it. So as I comb, my finger isn't there to pull it. There's no pulling with my finger. My finger's there to just keep it in place. So you can see how gentle it is. I always feel like how you treat the hair is how the hair is going to treat you. And if you're pulling it and you're forcing it into position, it's very, very rare that the haircut has like a softness and a kind of flow to it. It always, to me, then seems a little bit rigid, which is not what I like. So I'm just going to make sure that fringe is in. Okay. So the final section, we're coming through. So like I said at the beginning, this haircut isn't going to be for everyone, but it's where I'm going with my next personal collection, and it's based around this book on skateboarders that I was very kindly gifted by two photographer friends of mine. And I think it's just worth making the point at this bit is what's quite important is that how can I say? I'm going to layer the top of this haircut. So the way that I'm cutting this here isn't really going to matter. I could very easily have gone through, cut it all through the comb, one length, and it won't make a difference because I'm going to go through and put a layer through the top now. But I still feel like it's right to do everything in the correct way, even though I know it's not going to matter. I could have very easily taken that in two sections, cut it through my fingers and flow, but I'm still of the opinion that the overall haircut would know, and it wouldn't have the right amount of flow to it if I did that. So I'm just going to show you something now. I'm going to switch to, I'm going to add a little bit of the oil milk, and I'm going to switch to a wide tooth comb, and I'm just going to start to tease this around the front because I want to create almost like the guy on the skateboard. I'm going to show the image again for anyone that's just come in. The guy on this skateboard, you can see how there's lots of movement, so I don't just want to create a rigid short haircut that then there's a long piece at the side. I still want like a flow to it. So I'm just looking with the wide tooth comb at how this can flow and how that wave can come into it once I've started to layer the top. And if you guys can see how that starts to separate, and that's why we have the longer piece going into the front, so that it isn't just a rigid, angular haircut and then it drops. It does have a flow that goes into that side, but it's still too heavy on the top, so I'm going to do that layer that I just mentioned. I'm going to go in profile. I'm going to go this way when I show you this, so you can see. I'm literally taking a layer across the parting, so it's starting just on this side of the nose. I'm going to make sure I'm not getting any of the longer hair in from the other side. In fact, I'm going to spin around because I'm going to go from short to long. Is one on here? So I'll cut it here so you guys can see the profile right through the section. So I'm going to almost let my fringe be the guide. As soon as my fringe drops out, I know that I'm not going to affect the outer length. And then I'm going to cut a line that follows the shape of the head. So that line just flows up through there. Pull that out a little bit. Now, the next section, I'm going to cut from the straight on, so you can see that I'm over directing everything to the centre of the head. point so you can see that. So everything flows back to that first section. So that's coming a little bit too far. And the reason that I'm over-directing everything to the middle is because I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose that weight through there. If I didn't and I worked across square over the top, I'd take too much of my corner out and I'd lose that kind of bowl shape. The only reason I'm doing this layer is because I want to add a little bit of this. You can even see straight away I'm starting to get more movement through the top section. Am I at home? Yes, I'm at home. Yeah, I've been here the same as everyone. I'm at home with my wife and my daughter. We're just self-isolating and staying safe and doing these lives and trying to get our work done in between potty training a toddler. So yeah, it's nice and easy as you can imagine. So you can see how that haircut now is starting to flow around. Now just for anyone that didn't see the side, you can see that we have the line here and everything starts to just flow. What I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to add a little bit of salt spray just through the front section, and I'm going to comb the wave into the hair. So then, because I'm going to go on to cut the back now, and I want this to start to almost style itself. And then when we come back to see it, hopefully there should be a nice movement in there. I'm just kicking those ends back the wrong way. If you can see that, so I'm combing it across and then kicking it back forward. Okay, and the reason is, again, as I said, I want it to flow in shorter into here, but then as this flows back around, there's going to be a kick through the back into the longer side, which I'm going to go through and cut right now. So I'm going to show you the sectioning through the back first of all. Okay, so as with this side, where the sectioning was off onto the right hand side, I'm going to continue that through the back. So I'm not taking a section down the centre back, it's coming across to this side, if that makes sense. I'm just going to step in to see if that lines right. Okay, I'm going to section this longer side off out of the way, because cutting this side is going to be really quick, really easy. So now I have this huge chunk of hair that I need to continue this short section with. Would you place slightly darker roots to the fit? Yeah, I would, Paul. I think that would be really nice. I think a real rooty haircut in this, so it almost looks like it's the natural hair that you've just cut it out, would be great. So I'm going to show where I cut the scissor over comb through this side, and I'm going to take a diagonal line on the same point. Okay, I'm going to section this off. So I have all this long hair. great thing about working with these pivot point snap caps is just the options that it gives you, because you have tons, because the quality is so good that, you know, sometimes on head blocks that you don't really, you know, you're very limited because there isn't a feeling of real hair, but with these, it's pretty good. So I'm going to go very quickly and scissor over comb all this off. Right, which is the best way for me to do this so you guys can see? Maybe if I come here, then you can see. I'll keep moving it around so you can see it from different angles. So for anyone who didn't see when I did the side, I always start my scissor over comb at the top and work down. And I'm going to just do this very, very quickly. The reason I do that is so I can pick my length and the squareness that I want it right at the beginning, and then I know I'm committed. And especially on longer hair, it means I don't start to get mixed up with everything. Can everyone see okay there? So for anyone that has just joined, I'm just going to do a quick recap as I do my scissor over comb. This haircut is going to be a very, very extreme asymmetric haircut for two reasons. Firstly, I've been doing a lot of sketches earlier in the year of trying to figure out how to do an asymmetric haircut that didn't feel dated and that felt new and still felt relevant. And when I was over at the Daverness Village in January, we were teaching the collection to the Daverness art team. I started playing around on a block. My colleague Ashley was doing the colour education, so I was a bit of a loose end, and I started to work on a mannequin head and just play around with some strong, quite extreme asymmetric shapes. And that, combined with me receiving a book called Silver Skate 70s, which is basically a photography book about skaters in the Los Angeles area in the 70s. And the haircuts in it are so cool. And one thing, as you'd imagine, with skaters, when they are being photographed, the hair moves a lot because they're upside down, they're flying around. And some of the shapes are great. And there's one in particular where a guy looks like he's mid-air, and the hair kind of presses across his face so that he has this. I'll show the image again in a second. The look has this feeling of very, very extreme short to long. It isn't, but it looks like that. And I think sometimes, a lot of the time for me, that's where the best ideas come from, where something looks like something else and it isn't, but you see something in it and you think, okay, this has been missed, but there's an idea in here that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, and this is where this look's come through. And I'm going to create a full collection out of this. I'm going to photograph it myself. It's not going to be in black and white, but it's going to be very, very, very faded. It's going to be shot in natural sunlight, and it's going to be used in all of the skaters' haircuts and colours as an inspiration point. So I've just come through. I'm going to come on the profile so you can see how I'm cutting through here. So I'm just starting from the bottom and then going all the way up to dust anything off. So you can see it's quite starting at the top and working through. I'm sure a lot of you do it that way anyway. Starting at the top and working all the way up just means you can really take a lot of hair off very, very, very quickly. And it gives you a nice clean result. And I'm just going to refine the outline. Again, I don't want to make the outline too neat because I want this haircut, while it is strong, still not to be too sharp and too polished, because then that'll mean it's too extreme. Okay, so we have the scissor over comb through this side, and then we have the bowl through this side. This front's drying quite cool, it's all kicking across, which is what I want, so that's good. And you can see how that all starts to flow now. Can you see that flip as it all spins from the front? That wouldn't spin if it wasn't for that undercut, which is basically the main reason I've done the undercut rather than doing a classic graduation that's all connected. What did Dee say? Not often to get to see scissor over comb with such long hair. Yeah, it's quite nice actually doing it on long hair. It's quite satisfying. Okay, so I'm going to come around this side, I'm going to spray down, and I'm going to connect this length, but I'm going to take it a little bit longer. So I'm going to use my guide from the side, but as I did with the section on a diagonal, I'm going to flow that all the way through because I want this spin of the hair to flow through and to be longer through here. Okay, I'm going to put it around about here so that you guys can see. I'm just going to split the section on the side so that I'm not taking too big of a... I don't want to take all that as a guide because then it's going to be uneven. I've got a small amount of hair at the front, at the back. So can everyone see there? I'm going to cut this exactly the same way, starting quite low, using it as my guide, spinning my fingers under, and letting that fall in. Okay. Let's spin around a little bit more. There's a lot of hair on the floor here, as you can imagine. Maybe if I come around here, you guys can see better. If I'm blocking anyone's view, just say in the comments and I'll make sure I move around. So you can see that line is coming longer through there, yeah? Which scissors and comb do you use? Wide tooth comb to take less hair off? Yeah, so the scissors are little black scissors from Mazell and Palmer, and that's a YS part comb. And yeah, I'll split through sometimes. It all depends on the tension I want, or sometimes on my first section, I want to see the line straight away, so I'll use a wider tooth comb, so as I cut it, I can see like a very, very chunky line. So it's whichever I just feel in that time is the best. So I'm combing that down, again, no tension, because I want this line to stay true. You can't see there, let me spin that. So I'm just combing it down onto my fingers. And they're literally, the only tension is me turning my fingers slightly under. There's no tension at all. I could almost hold it on my fingers and cut like that. That's how little tension I want to have on it. So we can see now, as I mentioned at the beginning, this a little kick that's going to happen. That's going to start kicking. I'm taking sections that are parallel to the line that I'm cutting. So that makes sense. I'm going to switch to wide teeth now to put even less tension on as I'm getting close to the crown area and the blocks. I find with mannequin heads, the crown area isn't as prominent as it is with human hair, like real heads, you know, because the crown, the mannequins don't have such a prominent crown, but it's almost like ingrained into my brain that as you get near the crown, switch to wide teeth through my training, so. I'm just coming back around to the front to make sure this kick is still drying in nicely. So we're just splitting all that over the top there. If I don't get to any questions, when I'm cutting, if I'm missing the questions coming through, I'll make sure I go into the comments and answer everything. Okay, so you can see how that's starting to spin all the way through there. And as we come around to the front, there we go, that's a little bit better. I noticed the natural daylight was fading, so. I'm switching to my wide tooth again, just to start to really tease this in. I almost want it to sit as like a little cap, like a little short beret cap that can just kick. What sort of mannequin head am I using? I'm using the pivot point snap cap. So for anyone that doesn't know about them, it's essentially a scalp that you take off, and there's a screw underneath here. You fit the cap on, screw it in, and that's it. So from a sustainability point of view, the wastage just reduces on such a massive scale. If you think of how many mannequin heads I use a year, the thought of not having to throw any mannequin heads away now and just being able to keep this and keep putting the head on is amazing. So, and the quality is great. You know, I wanted to use them, but I left. The verdict was still out until I used them, because obviously the sustainability aspect is great, but they need to be able to do the job. And I have to say, certainly the blonde ones are maybe the best mannequins I've used. So yeah, it's great. Yeah, a pivot point snap cap, Pavel. And you can see as well, she's got long hair, right? Like you could do some long hair training, you could do long layered haircuts on it. Right. So I just want to recap a couple of things now. For anyone that's just coming in, we wanted to create a haircut that's very, very extreme in its contrasting lengths, which you can see that we've done. I got it from the Silver Skater book that I'm working from, and it was in particular, it was this image of this guy in mid-movement, mid-flight, where one side of his hair looks very short because of the way the photograph's been taken, and I really liked that, and I've had an idea of creating haircuts with very, very contrasting lengths. So that's why there's movement in this, that's why there's movement in this spinning through the side, and that's why I'm keeping this left-hand side very long. So, these guys in this scene that are in this book, these skaters, they weren't necessarily, I think someone called it on a live that I did last night, kitchen haircuts, and I think that's a good way to describe them. They were done, you know, by their friends. These guys weren't going spending a lot of money on haircuts. So there's a certain rawness to them that looks really, really nice, and that's, with that in mind, is the reason that I'm going to cut the outline, breaking every rule that I've ever been taught in hairdressing of how to cut an outline of a bob shape, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want it to have a real abrupt guillotine just chop to it. I don't want it to look like a hairdresser's cut it. Am I prepping the hair with Love Curl Revitalizer? No, I'm using a water spray, just a standard water spray in a Davines bottle, and I'm using the Oi milk. And I find it just, on a haircut like this, it just lets you glide through the hair. You cut it, and the section just sits, and it just creates such a nice coating. And especially when I'm wanting these little kicks to dry into the hair, if I can spin around, it's just going to help with that. So, I want to talk about the shape that I'm going to do here. So you can see we have this through the back, we have this long side now. But I still want, while they're going to be totally disconnected, I still want there to be an overall flow. There should be like a synergy between the two. It shouldn't just be short and long for the sake of having short and long. So, the line of this side is almost going to be a mirror image of the other side. And the way I'm going to do that is, where this side starts here and then goes longer, comes up shorter and then drops back to be longer, I'm going to do a line through this side that is shorter here and then drops longer as it gets through the back. So that it kind of all sits together, like this is here, this flows through here, rather than there just being a straight bob that kind of jars against it. Right. And again, for anyone that's just started to watch, I want this haircut to look raw. I don't want it on this side. I don't want it to look like a hairdresser's cut it. I want it to look very natural. So I'm going to cut it freehand. I'm combing it into place with the wide teeth again because I want to see like a real chunky line. And then I'm going to cut it in. And quite a strong angle with it as well. I'm going to go a little bit shorter. And then I'm going to scrunch a little bit and start to see how I like the shape contracting. I'm just going to tilt. At this point I would ask my client to tilt the head upside down, so I'm going to do the same. So I can see the length on this longer side and see how it's sitting. So I'll keep going back through here as well and just teasing this back into shape. And just extending that texture. No, I'm not using Day Day Bianca. I love Day Day, and that would normally be my cutting lotion, but in these times I've run out of it. I did a live last night, and my Day Day bottle is now a water spray bottle. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to when I can get a delivery sent of that and get some more of it. Because yeah, I would normally use Day Day as a cutting lotion, you're right. I feel like I'm going to take this a little bit shorter on this side. So I'm going to do exactly the same as I did. I'm going to comb it into position again and then cut it really rough, really freehand. Let's do it. So, like I said before, I'm purposely just going really rough, breaking every rule that I've ever been taught in hairdressing, but that's the kind of vibe that these haircuts that I'm working from have got at the moment. I think that length's better now. So, I'm going to switch to my razor and I'm going to go in and start to reduce some of the volume in this side, because at the moment that's just a one length haircut. So to do that, I'm going to section just behind the ear through here, and I'm going to take horizontal sections square, section off. I'm going to come on a diagonal because that's the length of my line, and I'm just going to remove some weight in here. A little long piece through that. I don't want to change the shape at all. I just want to remove the amount of hair that's there. So I'm not pressing it hard. For anyone that doesn't necessarily use the razor so much, just all on the weight of your hand. If your hand's pressing on heavy and it's weighty, you're going to take more hair away. And that's it, really. You don't want to overcomplicate it any more than that, especially if you're not so used to it. So I'm just stroking it down the surface of the hair. Just concentrating a little bit more. I'm being very careful not to go to the front hairline, or if I do, being very gentle, because I don't want it to spoil the haircut if I put a short piece of hair at the front. It needs to have that contrast. So yeah, I can feel the lightness just coming back through it now. And as I get to the top section, I'm going to go underneath because I don't want short pieces on the top. So there we go, there's a certain lightness coming through that side now. I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to do exactly the same from the back. I'm just going to take some diagonal sections through here because that's the line I've created. So everyone can see that. So I'm just moving quite fast up this side now. And again, going underneath as I get to the top section because I don't want long pieces, I don't want short pieces on the top. Okay. So I'm going to spin around just so I can take a look as well. Yeah, see, I think that length's better now. I think that length is better now, going shorter in here and then dropping longer. So, to finish off, I'm going to use Debonair's texturizing serum. We can do it that way. No, I wasn't just using the heel of the razor in the interior. I was using the whole length of it, using it horizontally flat on the hair, just removing weight. So I'm going to add a lot of this texturizing serum all the way through both sides. Jack Donnelly, Jacob Donnelly, would this cut work on your cat? Don't know, it depends how long your cat's hair is, doesn't it? And can your cat use a skateboard or not? That's the question you need to be asking yourself, Jack. Yeah, Jacob, I'll post the results. I'm going to post I'm going to post in probably, I reckon, an hour once this is dried. I'm going to go and stick her in the garden, she can dry, and then I'll post the final result. But I'm going to comb it all into shape so you can see the finished look now. So I've just put the texturizing serum through. I'm going to start to just pinch this top here because I want this to have a real volume and texture to it. So I'm just lifting these pieces of hair and spending time to kind of dress the haircut. I'm going to use a little bit of salt spray. And the final my favourite thing on this haircut, my final thing is the back, because as it dries, and I'll show this in the final the finished dried result that I'll post in the comment section, this bit of hair just kicks all the way across over the top of the long piece. I felt like, as I said at the beginning, I wanted to do an asymmetric haircut that I knew was going to be strong and it's going to be conceptual and it's not going to be for everyone, but I feel like I wanted to do it in a way that didn't feel dated, and I feel like this little kick over the long hair, you've got this straight piece of hair that waves at the end, and then you've got this kind of short bowl. And I think that's how it has a synergy together, because, so say you have, I just lift up to show you the full thing, you've got the fringe that starts here that's kicking back, and then it flows back all the way through into here, and then the line is short and then flows back through to there. So I'm going to let this dry, and like I said, in about an hour or so I'll post the finished result. But thank you very much for your time. I'll be here same time, Davines Education, Facebook, next Tuesday, 7 PM UK time, 8 PM Italian time. So thanks a lot, I hope you like it, stay cool, keep out of trouble, and I'll see everyone next week. Thank you.